The massive mare's hooves were inches from crushing the veterinarian's skull. When Marcus Hayes recognized the wild desperation in her eyes, it was the same look he'd seen in dying soldiers' faces. What he whispered to calm the raging horse came from the darkest memory of his Afghanistan deployment, words he'd never spoken aloud to anyone. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Montana Valley as Sarah Chen arrived at the Henderson Ranch, her veterinary bag heavy in her hand. She had received the emergency call 40 minutes earlier, but nothing in that frantic phone conversation had prepared her for the scene that greeted her at the far pasture. A massive chestnut mare, easily 17 hands tall and powerfully built, stood in the center of the field like a fortress. Her coat gleamed copper in the early light, muscles rippling beneath her skin as she shifted her weight. But it was not her size that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It was the small, crumpled form lying in the grass behind her, and the way the mare's eyes blazed with a wild, desperate fury that spoke of a mother's absolute devotion. Tom Henderson, the ranch owner, stood 50 feet away from the mare, his weathered face lined with worry and exhaustion. 3 ranch hands flanked him, each holding ropes and looking uncertain. Sarah could see the situation had already been going on for some time. The grass was trampled in wide circles, evidence of previous attempts to approach. One of the fence posts was splintered, and a medical kit lay scattered in the dirt, its contents strewn across the ground where someone had clearly dropped it in haste. Tom turned as Sarah approached, relief washing over his features. "Doc Chen, thank God you're here. That's Thunder, our best broodmare. Her foal, Storm, got tangled in old barbed wire about 2 hours ago. We managed to cut him free, but his leg is torn up bad. Real bad. He's losing blood, and we can't get anywhere near him. Thunder won't let anyone within 20 feet. She's already knocked down 2 of my men and nearly trampled Jenkins when he tried to use a tranquilizer dart." Sarah studied the mare carefully. Thunder stood with her head lowered, ears pinned flat against her skull. Her nostrils flared with each breath, and her front hoof pawed at the ground in warning. Every muscle in her body was coiled tight, ready to explode into action. Behind her, partially hidden by her massive frame, the foal lay on his side. Even from this distance, Sarah could see the bright red staining his white markings. The little one was maybe 3 months old, still small and vulnerable. His sides heaved with rapid, shallow breaths. "How long has he been down?" Sarah asked, her mind already calculating blood loss and shock protocols. "About 40 minutes now," Tom replied, his voice thick with frustration and fear. "Maybe less. We've tried everything. Tried approaching from different angles. Tried having his favorite stable hand, Maria, call to him. Thunder trusts Maria more than anyone, but even she got charged. That mare is out of her mind with fear and anger. I've owned her for 8 years, and I've never seen her like this. She's always been gentle, steady. But right now, she's 1,000 pounds of pure protective rage." One of the ranch hands, a young man with a bleeding scrape on his forearm, spoke up. "Boss, maybe we should just tranquilize her from a distance. Use the rifle with the dart. It's the only way we're going to get to that foal in time. Every minute we waste, that little guy is getting weaker." Sarah shook her head firmly. "Number. If we tranquilize her and she goes down wrong, she could land on the foal. Or if she fights the sedative in her current state of panic, she could injure herself or someone else even worse. We need another approach. Has anyone called animal control or the large animal rescue team?" "They're 3 hours out," Tom said, his jaw clenched. "That foal doesn't have 3 hours. Hell, I'm not sure he has 1 hour. Look at him, Doc. He's fading." Sarah looked again at the small form behind Thunder. The foal's eyes were half closed now, his head resting heavily on the ground. The pool of blood beneath his injured leg had grown larger. Time was indeed running out. She had seen enough trauma cases to know that foals, with their small bodies and rapid metabolisms, could go into shock quickly. If they didn't reach Storm soon, it wouldn't matter how skilled she was. There would be nothing left to save. Thunder suddenly reared up, her powerful front legs slashing at the air as Tom took an inadvertent step forward. The mare's scream split the morning air, a sound of such raw anguish that it made everyone freeze. When she came back down, she positioned herself even more protectively over her foal, her body language making it crystal clear that she would die before she let anyone near her baby. Sarah felt her chest tighten. She understood what she was seeing. This was not aggression for aggression's sake. This was a mother who had watched her baby suffer, who had seen humans approach with tools and ropes and needles, and who had decided that these humans were the threat. In Thunder's mind, she was not attacking. She was defending. She was being the barrier between her helpless foal and a dangerous world. The situation was impossible. Without reaching the foal, they couldn't stop the bleeding or treat him for shock. But reaching the foal meant getting past Thunder, and Thunder had made it abundantly clear that she would fight to the death to prevent that. Sarah's mind raced through options, but each one seemed more unlikely than the last. They needed a miracle. They needed someone who could speak the mare's language, who could communicate in a way that transcended words and ropes and human logic. That's when she heard the sound of a truck pulling up the ranch road, gravel crunching under its tires. Tom turned toward the sound, his expression shifting from desperation to something Sarah couldn't quite read. Recognition mixed with surprise, mixed with something that might have been hope. A battered blue pickup truck rolled to a stop near the pasture gate, and a man climbed out slowly, deliberately. He was tall and lean, maybe in his mid-40s, with sun-weathered skin and close-cropped dark hair that was starting to gray at the temples. He wore worn jeans, scuffed boots, and a faded green jacket that had seen better days. But it was the way he moved that caught Sarah's attention. There was a slight hitch in his gait, a carefully controlled stiffness that spoke of old injuries that had healed but never quite forgotten. "Marcus Hayes," Tom called out, his voice carrying across the field. "Didn't expect to see you out here. Thought you'd sworn off ranch work for good." The man, Marcus, closed the truck door behind him and walked toward the group with that same measured pace. His eyes were already on Thunder and the situation in the pasture, taking everything in with a quick assessing glance that suggested years of experience. "Heard the call go out on the scanner," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Figured you might need an extra hand. What's the situation?" Tom gestured toward the mare and foal. "Thunder's protecting her injured foal. Won't let anyone near. We've tried everything short of tranquilizing her, and Doc Chen here says that's too risky. The foal's been down for almost an hour now, bleeding from a wire injury. We're running out of time and options." Marcus nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving Thunder. He studied the mare's body language, the way she held herself, the tension in every line of her powerful frame. He looked at the scattered medical supplies, the trampled grass, the wary faces of the ranch hands. Then his eyes settled on the foal, that small, suffering form that Thunder was so desperately trying to protect. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, a tightening around his eyes that suggested he understood the mare's fear on a level that went beyond simple observation. "She's terrified," Marcus said quietly. "Not angry. Terrified. She doesn't understand that you're trying to help. All she sees is a bunch of people trying to take her baby away from her. In her mind, she's already failed him once by letting him get hurt. She's not going to fail him again." Sarah stepped forward, introducing herself. "I'm Dr. Chen, the veterinarian. You have experience with traumatized horses?" Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You could say that. I worked with military horses overseas, saw a lot of animals in crisis situations, spent time after I came back helping with rescue horses, the ones that had been abused or neglected. before I decided I needed a break from all of it. His tone was neutral, but Sarah caught the weight behind his words. Whatever Marcus had seen, whatever he had been through, it had left its mark. One of the ranch hands, the young one with the scraped arm, spoke up skeptically. "No offense, mister, but we've all got experience with horses. Thunder knows us. She's been here for years. If she won't listen to us, why would she listen to a stranger?" Marcus didn't take his eyes off the mare. "Because I'm not going to ask her to trust me. I'm going to show her that I understand. There's a difference." He glanced at Tom. "You said she knocked down 2 of your men and nearly trampled Jenkins. How did you approach her?" Tom rubbed the back of his neck, frustrated. "We tried slow. We tried talking to her. We tried having Maria, her favorite handler, go in alone. We tried ropes to see if we could create a barrier between her and us so someone could slip in from another direction. Every time anyone gets close, she charges or rears up. She's never been aggressive before, never. But right now, she's a completely different horse." Marcus was silent for a long moment, still watching Thunder. The mare had settled slightly. Her attention focused on the humans clustered by the fence, but her body remained coiled and ready. Every few seconds she would turn her head to check on her foal, a small, anxious movement that spoke volumes about her state of mind. The foal hadn't moved in several minutes. His breathing was visible but shallow, his little chest rising and falling with increasing difficulty. "I need everyone to back up," Marcus said finally. "Get at least 100 feet away from the fence. All of you. No ropes, no equipment, nothing that she could see as a threat. Tom, I'll need you to open the gate for me, then you back up too. Doc Chen, you stay close but out of sight. When I give you the signal, you come in fast with your kit. Be ready to work quickly." Sarah felt a spike of concern. "You're going in alone? Without any kind of protection? If she charges you, then she charges me," Marcus interrupted, his tone matter of fact. "But she won't. Not if I do this right." He looked at Tom. "How much do you trust me?" Tom hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Marcus, I know you've got skills. I've heard the stories about what you did overseas, about the horses you helped here before you left. But that mare is desperate and dangerous right now. If something goes wrong..." "It won't," Marcus said with quiet certainty. "But I need everyone to follow my instructions exactly. No heroics. No one tries to help me if things look bad. You interfere and you'll spook her worse. Understood?" The group exchanged uncertain glances, but Tom finally agreed. "All right, we'll do it your way. God knows nothing else has worked." Marcus walked back to his truck and removed his jacket, moving with deliberate slowness. He also removed his watch and anything else that might catch the light or make noise. When he returned to the fence, he was in just his plain t-shirt and jeans, his arms bare. Sarah could see the scars on his forearms now, some thin and white with age, others more recent and still slightly pink. Battle scars, not just from horses, she suspected. Tom opened the gate with a metallic creak that made Thunder's head snap up, her ears pinning back again in warning. Marcus waited until Tom had backed away, until all the ranch hands had retreated to the required distance, until it was just him and the gate and 100 feet of trampled grass between him and a terrified, protective mare who weighed over 1,000 pounds. He took a deep breath and Sarah saw his shoulders drop slightly, his entire body language shifting into something calm and non-threatening. Then he stepped through the gate. Thunder watched him, her dark eyes fixed on this new human entering her territory. She pawed the ground once, a clear warning, and her muscles bunched as if preparing to charge. But Marcus didn't move toward her. Instead, he did something that made Sarah's heart skip with surprise. He turned his back on the mare, completely. He stood there, just inside the gate, facing away from Thunder and toward the distant mountains, his posture relaxed and open. It was one of the most counterintuitive things Sarah had ever seen someone do in the presence of an aggressive animal, Every instinct screamed that you should never turn your back on a threat. But Marcus stood there, calm and still, as if he had all the time in the world. Minutes passed. Sarah found herself holding her breath, watching Thunder's reaction. The mare's ears flicked forward slightly, confusion replacing some of the aggressive tension in her stance. This human wasn't acting like the others. He wasn't approaching. He wasn't carrying ropes or tools. He wasn't even looking at her. Thunder took a tentative step forward, then stopped, uncertain. Her instinct was to charge, to drive this intruder away, but something about his behavior didn't fit the pattern. He wasn't a threat moving toward her baby. He was just a presence, passive and unthreatening. Marcus waited another full minute, then took 3 slow steps to his right, angling slightly but still not facing Thunder directly. He moved like water, smooth and unhurried, each step deliberate and telegraphed. Thunder watched but didn't charge. Marcus took 3 more steps, creating a slow arc, never making direct eye contact, never moving toward the foal. He was showing the mare that he understood the rules of her space, that he would respect her boundaries. In the language of horses, he was being submissive, non-confrontational. He was communicating without words. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 5 minutes, Marcus began to turn, gradually shifting his body so that he could see Thunder from his peripheral vision. The mare's head was up, her nostrils flaring as she tested his scent on the breeze. Her ears were no longer pinned flat. They swiveled, listening, processing. Marcus took another step, this one angling slightly closer but still maintaining a respectful distance. Thunder tensed but didn't move. "Good," Sarah heard Marcus murmur, his voice so low it barely carried. "Good girl. I see you. I see what you're protecting." He took another step, then another. Each movement was small, non-threatening, giving Thunder time to process and accept his presence. He kept his body angled, never presenting a direct frontal approach that would read as confrontational in horse language. His hands stayed loose at his sides, visible and empty. From behind the fence, Sarah watched in fascination. She had seen horse whisperers work before, had seen trainers use natural horsemanship techniques, but this was different. This was something deeper. Marcus wasn't trying to dominate or even to lead. He was trying to communicate on a fundamental level, to tell Thunder that he understood her fear, her pain, her desperate need to protect her baby. Thunder's head lowered slightly, a minute shift that most people might not even notice. But Marcus noticed. Sarah saw him pause, acknowledging the change, then continue his slow approach. He was maybe 30 feet from the mare now, close enough that if she decided to charge, he would have little time to react. The ranch hands behind the fence were tense, ready to vault over and help if things went wrong, but Marcus had made them promise to stay back. This dance between human and horse was delicate, balanced on a razor's edge of trust and fear. Then Marcus did something that made Sarah's throat tighten with emotion. He began to hum. It was a low, wordless melody, barely audible, more felt than heard. A simple, repetitive tune that had no particular structure or purpose except to create sound, to fill the space between them with something other than tension and fear. Thunder's ears flicked forward fully now, focused on this strange human who moved like no threat she had ever encountered, who made sounds that were gentle and rhythmic rather than harsh and commanding. Marcus hummed and took another step. Thunder shifted her weight, but held her ground. Another step. Another. 20 feet now. 15. Sarah could see the foal more clearly from this angle. Storm's eyes were closed, his small body frighteningly still, except for the shallow rise and fall of his ribs. The blood had soaked into the grass around his injured leg, creating a dark stain that had spread wider since she first arrived. They were losing him. Every second that passed was another second closer to the point of no return, when even her skills wouldn't be enough to save him. Marcus seemed to sense the urgency too, but he didn't rush. Rushing now would undo everything he had accomplished. 10 feet from Thunder, he finally stopped. He was close enough now that the mare could reach him if she wanted to, close enough that one well-placed kick would break bones and leave him in the dust beside her foal. Thunder's nostrils flared wide, breathing in his scent. Marcus continued to hum, his eyes soft, his body language speaking volumes in the silent dialect of trust and respect. Then Marcus did something that made every person watching hold their breath. He slowly, carefully, lowered himself to his knees. The movement made him smaller, less threatening, vulnerable. He knelt there in the trampled grass, just feet from Thunder, his hands resting loosely on his thighs, his head slightly bowed. It was a gesture of complete submission, of absolute trust. He was putting himself at her mercy, showing her that he was not a threat, that he understood she had every right to protect her baby, and that he would not challenge her authority. Thunder's entire body seemed to soften at this gesture. Her head lowered further, her ears relaxing from their defensive position. She took a tentative step toward Marcus, then another, until her massive head was hovering just above his own. Sarah watched in amazement as Thunder began to sniff Marcus, her breath stirring his hair. The mare was investigating him, learning about him through scent and proximity, trying to determine whether this strange human was truly as safe as he appeared. Marcus remained perfectly still, continuing his low humming, letting Thunder take all the time she needed. This was her decision. He was simply making himself available, showing her that there was another option besides fighting everyone away. After a long moment, Thunder took one more step, and her muzzle touched Marcus's shoulder, a gentle exploration that was almost tender in its cautiousness. Marcus slowly raised one hand, moving with infinite patience, and held it out palm up for Thunder to smell. She sniffed his hand, her warm breath washing over his skin, and then, miracle of miracles, she allowed him to touch her. His fingers brushed against her muzzle, a feather-light contact that acknowledged her bravery in letting him this close. "Good girl," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're such a good mama. You've been so strong. But your baby needs help now. He needs help that only we can give him. Will you let me help him? Will you trust me?" Thunder pulled back slightly, her eyes meeting Marcus's for the first time in a direct gaze. In that moment, something passed between them, some wordless understanding that transcended species. Marcus had seen this look before, in the eyes of wounded soldiers who had to make the impossible choice to trust medics who were strangers, to believe that the pain being inflicted was for healing rather than harm. It was the look of someone standing at the edge of a leap of faith, knowing that the only way forward was to jump and hope there would be solid ground on the other side. The mare turned her head to look at her foal, at Storm lying so still in the grass, and a sound came from deep in her chest, a low, mournful whicker that spoke of a mother's agony at seeing her child suffer. When she turned back to Marcus, something in her had shifted. The aggressive tension had drained away, replaced by an exhaustion that was bone deep. She was tired of fighting. She was tired of being the only thing standing between her baby and the world. She wanted help, even if accepting it meant overcoming every protective instinct screaming at her to trust no one. Marcus slowly rose to his feet, his movements still careful and deliberate. He took a sideways step, angling toward the foal, and Thunder watched but didn't block him. Another step. Thunder shifted, moving slightly to the side, creating a narrow path. It was permission. Cautious, conditional permission, but permission nonetheless. Marcus looked back toward the fence where Sarah waited with her medical kit. He raised his hand, a simple signal, and Sarah was moving before she could think twice about it, grabbing her bag and running across the field as fast as her legs would carry her. As Sarah approached, Thunder's head came up sharply, and for a moment it seemed like the spell might break, like the mare might revert to her earlier aggression at the sight of another human. But Marcus stepped between them, not blocking Thunder's view but creating a buffer, his presence a reassurance. "It's okay," he said softly to the mare. "She's here to help, just like me. She's going to make the pain stop." Thunder's nostrils flared, her body tense again, but she held her ground. Sarah dropped to her knees beside the foal, her trained hands already assessing the damage, even as her heart broke at what she saw. The wire had cut deep into Storm's right foreleg, severing blood vessels and tearing through muscle. The foal had lost a dangerous amount of blood, and his gums were pale, his pulse thready and weak. Sarah worked with practiced efficiency, pulling supplies from her bag. She applied a pressure bandage to the worst of the bleeding, her fingers moving quickly to tie it off and slow the blood loss. Then came the IV catheter, slipped into the foal's vein to deliver fluids and medications to combat shock. Storm barely responded to the needle, which told Sarah just how far gone he was. A healthy foal would have struggled, would have tried to stand. Storm just lay there, his life hanging by the thinnest of threads. Marcus knelt on the other side of the foal, his hand resting gently on Storm's neck, feeling the faint pulse beneath his fingers. Thunder stood over them all, her head lowered, watching every movement with intense focus. Sarah could feel the mare's hot breath on the back of her neck as she worked, could sense the massive animal's presence like a physical weight. One wrong move, one moment of perceived threat to the foal, and Thunder could still lash out. But Marcus's hand reached up, finding Thunder's muzzle, maintaining that connection, that line of trust they had established. Sarah's hands moved with the precision born of years of emergency veterinary work, but inside, her mind was racing through worst-case scenarios. The foal's body temperature was dropping. His breathing was becoming more labored, and the amount of blood loss was severe enough that even with immediate intervention, his chances were only marginally better than they had been 10 minutes ago. She cleaned the wound as best she could in the field, her fingers working quickly to remove dirt and debris, while Marcus kept Thunder calm with his quiet presence and gentle touches. The mare flinched every time Sarah touched a particularly sensitive area on Storm's leg, a sympathetic response to her baby's pain that was almost heartbreaking to witness. "We need to get him to the clinic," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady despite the urgency she felt. "He needs surgery to repair these vessels properly, and I need to get him on stronger antibiotics and pain medication than I can give him here. But moving him is going to be tricky. If Thunder thinks we're taking him away from her, all of this could fall apart in seconds." She looked at Marcus, her expression conveying the impossible situation they were in. They had gained Thunder's conditional trust, but asking her to watch humans load her injured baby into a vehicle and drive away might be more than that fragile trust could bear. Marcus's jaw tightened, his eyes moving from the foal to the mare and back again. He understood the dilemma. In the wild, a mare would stay with her injured foal until the very end, would defend it against predators until her last breath. Asking Thunder to step aside while they took Storm away went against every instinct she possessed. But without that surgery, without the advanced care that only the clinic could provide, Storm would die. There was no middle ground here, no compromise solution. They needed Thunder to do the impossible, to let go of her baby and trust that these humans would bring him back. "Tom," Marcus called out toward the fence, his voice carrying across the field. "We need the horse trailer. Bring it as close as you can to the gate, but do it slowly. No sudden movements, no loud noises, and get Maria to bring Thunder's feed bucket, the one she eats from every morning. We're going to need every bit of familiarity and routine we can give her right now." Tom and the ranch hands moved into action, and within minutes the sound of a truck engine rumbled to life. The trailer, a spacious two-horse model that Thunder had been in countless times before for routine vet visits and trips to shows, was backed carefully toward the gate. Maria appeared, jogging across the field with Thunder's bucket, the one made of blue plastic that the mare had eaten from for years. It was a small thing, but Marcus knew that in moments of extreme stress, familiar objects could be anchors, touchstones that helped animals feel safer in frightening situations. Sarah finished stabilizing Storm as much as she could in the field, wrapping the leg securely and making sure the IV line was taped down and wouldn't pull out during transport. She administered a dose of pain medication that would help the foal during the short trip to the clinic without sedating him so deeply that it would compromise his already fragile system. Storm's eyes fluttered open briefly at the prick of the needle, and he made a soft, weak sound that brought Thunder's head down immediately, her muzzle touching her baby's face in a gesture of comfort and reassurance. Marcus watched this interaction, and something in his expression shifted, becoming even more determined. He stood slowly, brushing the dirt from his knees, and turned to face Thunder directly for the first time since entering the pasture. The mare's ears swiveled toward him, alert and questioning. Marcus reached out his hand, palm up, offering it to her in that same non-threatening gesture he had used before. Thunder sniffed his hand again, and this time Marcus spoke, his voice low and intense, carrying a weight that made even Sarah pause in her work to listen. "I know what it's like," Marcus said. His words meant for Thunder, but somehow feeling like they were being pulled from somewhere deep inside him. "I know what it's like to watch someone you love hurting and not be able to fix it. To feel helpless and angry and terrified all at once. I've stood over friends, over brothers, and felt that same desperation you're feeling right now. That need to protect them from everything, even the people trying to help. Because what if the help isn't enough? What if you let your guard down and they die anyway, and then it's your fault for not fighting hard enough?" Thunder stood perfectly still, her dark eyes fixed on Marcus's face. Sarah found herself frozen too, struck by the raw emotion in his voice, by the realization that Marcus wasn't just talking to the horse. He was talking to himself, to his own memories, to wounds that had never fully healed. Behind the fence, Tom and the ranch hands had stopped moving, caught by something in Marcus's tone that demanded their attention. "But here's what I learned," Marcus continued, his hand moving to rest against Thunder's powerful neck. "Fighting isn't always protecting. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step back and let others carry the weight for a while. Sometimes trust is harder than fighting, but it's the only way forward. Your baby needs more than you can give him right now. He needs what we can give him. And I swear to you, on everything I've ever loved and lost, that we will do everything in our power to bring him back to you whole and safe." The silence that followed Marcus's words was profound, broken only by the soft whisper of wind through the grass and Storm's labored breathing. Thunder stood motionless, her eyes locked on Marcus's face, and Sarah could have sworn the mare understood every word, understood the promise being made, and the man making it. Then slowly, Thunder lowered her head and pressed her forehead against Marcus's chest, a gesture of submission and trust so complete that Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. The massive mare, who had been a wall of protective fury just an hour before, was yielding. She was choosing to trust. Marcus wrapped his arms around Thunder's neck, his face buried in her mane for just a moment, and Sarah saw his shoulders shake with a breath that might have been relief or grief or both. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears, but his expression was composed. He nodded to Sarah. "Let's get Storm loaded. We don't have much time. Thunder and I are going to walk together to the trailer. She needs to see where we're taking him." Together, Marcus and Sarah carefully lifted the foal. Storm was small enough that they could manage his weight between them, though Sarah felt every ounce as they stood. The foal's head lolled against Marcus's chest, his breathing shallow but steady. Thunder immediately moved to walk alongside them, her nose nearly touching her baby, her presence a constant reassurance to Storm even in his semi-conscious state. Step by careful step, they made their way across the pasture toward the waiting trailer. Maria stood by the trailer ramp with Thunder's feed bucket, her face streaked with tears. She had worked with Thunder for 5 years, had been there when Storm was born, had bottle-fed him during his first difficult week when he struggled to nurse. Seeing the bond between Marcus and the mare, seeing Thunder finally accept help, was almost too much emotion to process. As they approached, Maria held out the bucket, letting Thunder see it and smell the familiar grain inside. "Easy, girl," Maria whispered. "We're going to take care of your baby." The loading process was delicate. Tom had put fresh straw in the trailer and opened both side doors to allow maximum light and air circulation so it wouldn't feel like a trap. Marcus climbed in first, and then he and Sarah carefully positioned Storm on the straw-covered floor. Thunder followed without hesitation, her hooves clattering on the metal ramp, driven by her need to be close to her foal. The trailer shifted with her weight as she crowded into the space, but she was calm, focused entirely on Storm rather than on her surroundings. Sarah quickly checked Storm's vital signs again, making sure the transport hadn't disturbed the IV line or caused additional bleeding. The foal's pulse was still weak, his breathing still labored, but he was hanging on. They had bought him a chance, at least. A small chance, but more than he had before. She looked up at Marcus, who stood in the cramped trailer space beside Thunder, his hand resting on the mare's shoulder. "This is going to be the hard part," Sarah said quietly. "We need to close the trailer and go. Thunder needs to stay here." Marcus nodded, though his expression showed he understood exactly how difficult this next step would be. He turned to Thunder, his hand moving to cup her massive head, looking directly into her eyes. "You can't come with us, girl. You need to stay here where it's safe, but I promise you, we will take care of Storm. I promise you he'll come back." Thunder's ears flicked back and she made a low, anxious sound, sensing the separation that was about to occur. Her head swung toward her foal and she nickered softly, a sound that was both greeting and goodbye. Marcus leaned close to Thunder's ear and began to whisper something, so low that Sarah couldn't make out the words. Whatever he was saying, it seemed to calm the mare slightly. Her breathing slowed, and though she remained tense, she didn't try to block their exit from the trailer. When Marcus finally stepped back, his hand trailing along Thunder's neck until the last possible moment, the mare let him go. She stood there, watching, as Sarah carefully climbed out with her medical kit, as Marcus followed. As Tom moved to close the trailer doors, the moment the doors shut, Thunder screamed. It was a sound of pure anguish, a mother's cry for her missing child that carried across the entire ranch and seemed to echo off the distant mountains. She kicked at the trailer walls, the sound of her hooves against metal ringing out like gunshots. Maria rushed forward, calling Thunder's name, but the mare was beyond hearing. She was lost in her grief and fear, in the terrible realization that her baby was being taken away and she couldn't follow. Marcus stood frozen beside the trailer, his fists clenched at his sides, his face pale. Sarah saw the muscles in his jaw working, saw the way his breathing had become shallow and rapid. He was having some kind of reaction, triggered by Thunder's distress, by the sound of her panic. Tom noticed too and moved toward Marcus, but the veteran held up a hand, stopping him. "I'm okay," Marcus said, though his voice was strained. "Just get Storm to the clinic. I'll stay with Thunder. I'll help her through this." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to insist that Marcus come with her in case she needed his calming presence for Storm during the drive, but one look at his face told her he needed to stay here more than she needed him there. Whatever demons Marcus was battling in this moment, they required him to see this through with Thunder, to keep the promise he had made. She nodded and climbed into the truck's passenger seat as Tom took the wheel. Within seconds, they were pulling away, the trailer rattling behind them, carrying one small, injured foal whose life hung in the balance. As the truck disappeared down the long ranch driveway, Marcus turned his attention fully to the trailer that held Thunder. The mare's screams had subsided into a continuous, heartbroken whinnying, punctuated by kicks that made the whole trailer rock on its frame. Maria stood nearby, wringing her hands, tears streaming down her face. She had never seen Thunder like this, had never witnessed such complete emotional breakdown in an animal. "Marcus, what do we do?" Maria asked, her voice cracking. "Should we let her out? She's going to hurt herself in there." Marcus shook his head slowly, moving toward the trailer with that same careful deliberation he had used when first approaching Thunder in the field. "Not yet. If we let her out now, she'll try to follow. She'll run herself into the ground trying to catch that truck. We need to give her a few minutes to understand that fighting isn't going to bring Storm back faster." He reached the trailer door and pressed his hand against the metal, feeling the vibrations of Thunder's movements inside. "Easy, girl," he called out, his voice carrying over her distressed sounds. "Easy. I'm still here. You're not alone." The whinnying intensified for a moment, then seemed to focus, as if Thunder was trying to locate the source of that familiar voice. Marcus began to hum again, that same wordless melody he had used in the field, his hand flat against the trailer door. Slowly, gradually, Thunder's movements became less frantic. The kicks came further apart. Her cries shifted from panic to something closer to grief, a mourning sound that was somehow even more heartbreaking than the fear had been. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 minutes, Marcus signaled to Tom's remaining ranch hands to help him open the trailer doors. Thunder burst out the moment the latch released, her hooves hitting the ground hard enough to send up clouds of dust. She spun in a circle, her head high, searching desperately for any sign of her foal. When she didn't find him, she turned to Marcus, and the look in her eyes was a mixture of betrayal and anguish. He had promised. He had asked her to trust, and now her baby was gone. Marcus stood his ground, letting Thunder approach him, letting her make the choice about what happened next. The mare could have run past him, could have tried to follow the truck's fading rumble in the distance. Instead, she came to him. Thunder pushed her head against Marcus's chest, hard enough to make him take a step back, and made a sound that was almost a sob. Marcus wrapped his arms around her neck again, and this time he let his own emotions show. "I know," he whispered into her mane. "I know it hurts. I know you feel like you failed him. But you haven't. You gave him a chance by letting us help. You were brave enough to do the hardest thing a mother can do. You let go." Thunder trembled under his hands, her whole body shaking with the force of her grief and fear. For the next hour, Marcus stayed with Thunder, walking the perimeter of the pasture with her, letting her move and process her emotions. Maria brought fresh hay and water, but Thunder showed no interest in either. Her entire focus was on the driveway, waiting for the truck to return, for some sign that her baby was coming back. Marcus understood that feeling, that desperate vigil, better than he wanted to admit. He had done his own version of this waiting, pacing hospital corridors overseas, standing watch over injured soldiers, promising them they would make it home even when the odds said otherwise. The memories rose up like ghosts, unbidden and unwelcome. The field hospital in Kandahar, the explosion that had taken out his convoy, the horses they had been transporting, military animals trained for special operations in rough terrain. Most had died instantly in the blast, but one, a gray mare named Stella, had survived with catastrophic injuries. Marcus had stayed with her for hours while the veterinary team worked, had held her head and whispered promises just like he had whispered to Thunder. But Stella hadn't made it. Despite everything, despite all the promises and prayers and desperate hope, she had slipped away. And Marcus had felt like he had failed her, like his inability to protect her was a betrayal of the bond they had built during their months working together. After Stella's death, Marcus had continued working with military horses for another year, but something inside him had broken. He found himself unable to distance himself emotionally from the animals he worked with, unable to maintain the professional detachment that military service required. Every injury felt personal. Every loss felt like another piece of himself being torn away. Finally, his commanding officer had pulled him aside and suggested gently but firmly that perhaps Marcus needed to consider a different assignment. Something that didn't involve animals. Something that wouldn't trigger the trauma responses that were becoming more frequent and more severe. Marcus had left the service after that, returning to Montana with a medical discharge and a head full of memories he couldn't escape. He had tried working with rescue horses for a while, hoping that saving animals who had been abused or neglected would somehow balance the scales for the ones he hadn't been able to save in the war. But each rescue had taken its toll, each animal's pain becoming his own, until he could barely sleep at night. The nightmares had become worse, not better. So Marcus had made the difficult decision to step away from horses entirely, to try to build a life that didn't revolve around the creatures that had given him so much purpose but also so much pain. He had taken a job at a hardware store in town, kept to himself and tried to forget. But you can't forget something that's written into your bones. And when he heard the call about Thunder and her injured foal on his police scanner that morning, something had pulled him to the ranch with a force he couldn't resist. Now, walking beside Thunder as she grieved, Marcus realized that maybe he had needed this as much as she needed him. Maybe this was the universe giving him a chance to rewrite the ending, to prove that promises made in desperation could actually be kept. Thunder stopped suddenly, her head swinging toward the road again, her ears pricked forward. Marcus looked too, but there was nothing there, no sign of the truck returning. "It's too soon, girl," he said gently. "The surgery will take time, but they'll come back. I promised you they would, and I keep my promises." Maria approached with a blanket, noticing that Marcus had been standing in the cool morning air in just his t-shirt for nearly 2 hours now. "Here," she said softly, draping it over his shoulders. "You should sit down for a bit. Rest. You've done more than anyone could have asked." Marcus accepted the blanket with a nod of thanks, but made no move to sit. Rest wasn't something that came easily to him these days. He glanced at Maria, seeing the concern in her eyes, and offered her a tired smile. "How long have you worked with Thunder?" "5 years," Maria replied, coming to stand beside him, her own hand reaching out to stroke Thunder's shoulder. "Since she first came to the ranch. Tom bought her as a 3-year-old from a breeder in Wyoming. She was always so gentle, so trusting, trained easy, never gave anyone trouble. This is the first time I've ever seen her aggressive, and even then, it wasn't really aggression. It was fear, pure maternal fear." Maria's voice caught. "I should have been there when Storm got caught in the wire. I should have seen it happening." Marcus shook his head. "You can't watch them every second. Accidents happen. What matters is how we respond to them, what we do when things go wrong. You called for help. You did exactly what needed to be done. The rest of it, the blame and the guilt, that's just weight we put on ourselves because we can't stand feeling helpless. Believe me, I know all about that." The sun climbed higher in the sky as the morning wore on. Tom came out periodically to check on them, bringing water and updates, though there were no updates to give. The clinic hadn't called, which could mean anything. It could mean the surgery was going well and they were still in the middle of it, or it could mean something had gone terribly wrong and Sarah didn't want to deliver bad news over the phone. Marcus tried not to let his mind go to dark places, but it was a battle he wasn't entirely winning. Thunder, for her part, had settled into a vigilant waiting. She stood near the fence closest to the driveway, her gaze fixed on the horizon, occasionally pawing at the ground or calling out with that same mournful whinny. Marcus stayed beside her, his presence a steady anchor. He had always been good at waiting. The military had taught him that skill, if nothing else. Wait for orders. Wait for extraction. Wait to find out if your friends made it through surgery. Wait to see if the promises whispered in the dark would hold up in the light of day. Around noon, Maria brought sandwiches, insisting that Marcus eat something even if Thunder wouldn't. He accepted one and managed a few bites, though his stomach was tight with anxiety. Thunder's nose bumped against his arm and he broke off a piece of bread, offering it to her. She sniffed it but turned away. "Come on, girl," Marcus coaxed. "You need to keep your strength up. When Storm comes home, he's going to need you to be strong for him." The mare's ear flicked at the mention of her foal's name, but still she refused the food. By early afternoon, Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket, making both him and Thunder startle. He pulled it out quickly, his heart hammering. "Tom's number." Marcus answered on the first ring. "Yeah?" His voice was rougher than he intended, scraped raw by hours of anxiety and exposure to the wind. "Marcus, it's Tom. I just got off the phone with Dr. Chen. Storm made it through surgery. He's stable. Still critical, but stable. She was able to repair the damaged vessels and she's got him on antibiotics and pain management. She says the next 24 hours are crucial, but he's got a fighting chance." Relief flooded through Marcus so intensely that his knees went weak. He reached out to steady himself against Thunder's solid bulk, his free hand gripping her mane. "That's good," he managed. "That's really good. When can he come home?" Tom's voice held a note of caution. "That's the thing. Sarah wants to keep him at the clinic for at least 3 days, maybe longer, depending on how he responds to treatment. She needs to monitor him closely, watch for infection, make sure he's eating and gaining strength." Marcus felt Thunder tense beside him, as if she could sense through his touch that they were talking about her baby. 3 days, Marcus repeated. "Tom, I don't think Thunder can handle 3 days of not knowing if he's alive or dead." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Marcus could hear Tom discussing something with someone in the background. Then Tom's voice came back, thoughtful and measured. "What if we brought Thunder to the clinic? Sarah has a large recovery stall with an observation window. We could stable Thunder in the adjacent stall. They wouldn't be together, but Thunder could see Storm, could know he's alive and being cared for. It's not ideal, but it might be enough." Marcus looked at Thunder, at the exhaustion and grief written in every line of her body, and made a decision. "We're coming. Give me an hour to get her ready for transport." The drive to the clinic was tense but manageable. Thunder loaded into the trailer with minimal resistance this time, as if some part of her understood that this journey would take her closer to Storm rather than further away. Marcus rode in the trailer with her, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, his presence a calming force that kept the mare from panicking when the truck hit bumps or made turns. He kept up a steady stream of quiet talk, reminding Thunder that Storm was waiting, that soon she would see him again, that everything was going to be okay. Whether he was reassuring the horse or himself, Marcus couldn't entirely say. When they arrived at the clinic, Sarah met them at the unloading area, her scrubs still stained with Storm's blood, her face drawn with fatigue but lit with cautious optimism. "The surgery went as well as we could have hoped," she told Marcus, as Thunder backed carefully down the ramp. "He woke up about an hour ago and has been alert. He's in pain, but manageable pain. The leg will heal. Whether he'll ever be sound enough for riding or breeding is uncertain, but he'll live. And right now, that's what matters." Thunder's head came up sharply, her nostrils flaring as she caught Storm's scent on the air. She whinnied, loud and urgent, and from somewhere inside the clinic building came an answering call, weak but unmistakable. Storm. The foal was calling for his mother. Thunder tried to surge forward, and it took Marcus's full strength on the lead rope to keep her from bolting toward the sound. "Easy, easy," he said firmly but gently. "We're going to see him, I promise. But you have to walk, not run. Can you do that for me?" Thunder's entire body quivered with the effort of restraining herself, but she managed to slow to a fast walk as Marcus led her into the clinic. Sarah had prepared one of the large recovery stalls, bedded deep with fresh straw and equipped with hay and water. But more importantly, the entire front wall of the stall was a series of metal bars with wide spacing, allowing clear visual access to the adjacent stall where Storm lay. The foal was nestled in his own deep bedding, his injured leg wrapped in clean white bandages, an IV line still running into his neck. He looked impossibly small and fragile, but his eyes were open and focused on the doorway, as if he had been waiting for this moment. When Thunder saw him, she made a sound unlike anything Marcus had heard from her before. It was joy and relief and love, all wrapped into one tremulous note. She pressed herself against the bars, stretching her neck as far as it would reach, trying to touch her baby. Storm struggled to stand, his legs shaking with effort, and Sarah moved quickly to support him, helping him find his balance. The foal took 2 wobbling steps toward his mother, and then their noses touched through the bars, a connection that was physical and emotional and profound. Marcus felt his throat close with emotion as he watched the reunion. Thunder whickered softly, running her muzzle over every part of Storm she could reach through the bars, checking him, reassuring herself that he was real and alive and here. Storm leaned into his mother's touch, his small body relaxing for the first time since the accident, finding safety in her presence. The foal's ears, which had been pinned back in pain and distress, now swiveled forward. His breathing, which had been rapid and shallow, deepened and slowed. The healing power of a mother's love was something no medicine could replicate. Sarah stood back, giving the horses their moment, and came to stand beside Marcus. "You saved them both," she said quietly. "You know that, right? Without you, Thunder never would have let me near Storm in that field. He would have bled out before help arrived. And without you staying with her these past hours, Thunder would have made herself sick with stress. You gave them both a chance." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I just did what needed to be done. What anyone would have done." Sarah studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful and knowing. "Not anyone, Marcus. Most people would have tried to force the situation, to use restraints or sedation or sheer numbers to overpower her. You understood that what she needed wasn't to be controlled. She needed to be heard. There's a difference, and not many people recognize it." Marcus didn't respond, but something in his chest loosened slightly at her words. For years he had carried the weight of his failures, the animals he hadn't been able to save, the promises he hadn't been able to keep. But here, today, he had kept his promise. Storm was alive, Thunder was at peace. Maybe that counted for something. Over the next 3 days, Marcus became a fixture at the clinic. He arrived each morning before dawn and stayed until well after dark, splitting his time between Thunder's stall and helping Sarah with other tasks around the facility. He mucked stalls, repaired a broken fence, reorganized the supply room, anything to keep his hands busy, while Thunder and Storm continued their side-by-side recovery. Tom had offered to pay him for his time, but Marcus had refused. This wasn't about money. This was about seeing something through to the end, about proving to himself that he could still do this work without falling apart. Storm improved steadily under Sarah's care. His wound began to heal, the angry redness fading to healthy pink tissue. His appetite returned with a vengeance, and he nursed eagerly through the bars whenever Thunder positioned herself to allow it. The foal's personality emerged more each day, his initial trauma giving way to curiosity and playfulness. He would nibble at Sarah's shirt when she came to change his bandages, would nicker hopefully when Marcus appeared with fresh hay. He was going to be okay, more than okay. He was going to thrive. Thunder, too, transformed during those days. The wild desperation in her eyes faded, replaced by a calmer vigilance. She ate her meals, rested when Storm rested, and seemed to understand that this separation was temporary and necessary. Each morning when Marcus arrived, she would greet him with a soft nicker of recognition, and each evening when he prepared to leave, she would press her forehead against his chest in that gesture of trust and affection that never failed to move him. They had formed a bond in that pasture, forged in crisis and strengthened through shared waiting. It was the kind of connection that transcended words, that spoke to something fundamental about the capacity for understanding between different species. On the fourth day, Sarah declared Storm well enough to go home. The wound was clean and healing beautifully. The foal was bearing weight on the injured leg without excessive pain, and his energy levels were back to normal. "It's time," she told Marcus and Tom as they gathered in the clinic's main room. "He needs to be back in his familiar environment now. The rest of his recovery can happen at the ranch." Tom nodded, relief evident on his weathered face. "Maria's got his stall ready. Fresh bedding, extra heat lamps, the works. We're ready for him." The loading process was remarkably smooth this time. Storm, who had never been in a trailer before the emergency trip to the clinic, walked up the ramp with barely a hesitation, following his mother's lead. Thunder loaded calmly, her earlier trauma forgotten in the joy of finally being reunited with her baby in the same space. Marcus rode in the trailer with them again, watching as Storm nursed contentedly while Thunder stood solid and patient, her entire demeanor radiating peace and contentment. This was how it was supposed to be, mother and baby together and safe. When they arrived back at the ranch, Maria was waiting with tears in her eyes. She had prepared Storm's stall exactly as promised, and she had also hung a hand-painted sign above the door that read, "Storm's Miracle" in careful letters. Thunder and Storm were led to their stall together, and for the first time in 5 days, there were no bars between them. The foal immediately curled up in the deep straw, exhausted from the journey, and Thunder positioned herself protectively over him, finally able to fulfill her role as his guardian without interference or separation. Marcus stood outside the stall, his hand resting on the doorframe, and felt something shift inside him. For years, he had believed that his connection to horses was tainted by trauma, that every interaction would inevitably lead him back to those dark memories of loss and failure. But watching Thunder and Storm together, seeing the tangible proof that his intervention had saved them both, he realized that maybe he had been wrong. Maybe the point wasn't to avoid the pain. Maybe the point was to walk through it, to let the grief and the fear exist alongside the love and the hope, to understand that both were valid and necessary parts of the experience. Tom approached, extending his hand to Marcus. "I can't thank you enough for what you did, for both of them. And I want you to know there's a job here if you want it. Working with the horses, full-time, part-time, whatever you're comfortable with. We could use someone with your skills, with your understanding." Marcus hesitated, old instincts urging him to decline, to protect himself from future hurt. But then Thunder turned her head to look at him, and in her eyes he saw something that made him reconsider. Trust, gratitude, recognition of a kindred spirit who understood what it meant to be afraid and to push through that fear anyway.